G7 meeting took place in Japanese Hiroshima, and Ukraine will get more support. At the same time, grain initiative was prolonged this week. Good afternoon, this is Pavel Štermach on UATV channel, explaining hard truths in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. A summit of the leaders of the G7 countries was held in the Japanese city of Hiroshima. But for us it was the G8 summit, in which the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, also took part. World media emphasized the deep symbolism of the venue of this year's G7 Leaders Summit, because it was Hiroshima that became the site of the first use of nuclear weapons in the history of mankind during World War II. The Russian invasion of Ukraine became one of the main issues on the agenda at the G7 summit in Japan. In particular, the leaders discussed the situation and the deployment of forces on the battlefield in Ukraine, the current state of sanctions and steps the G7 can take to prevent evasion and strengthen their impact in the coming months. International Peace Summit regarding Ukraine, Russia's repeated threats to use nuclear weapons, the presence of the Ukrainian president and his calls for greater support for Kyiv in the fight against Russian Federation added additional intensity to the discussion.
I am grateful to Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, for the invitation to participate in the G7 summit. Now is a crucial moment for the fate of peace in Ukraine and for the future of the rules-based world order. It is extremely important that the world has the opportunity to hear Ukraine's voice in Hiroshima. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Even before the start of the summit, all G7 leaders supported a joint statement where they supported that peace in Ukraine cannot be achieved without the complete withdrawal of Russian troops. G7 leaders supported the program of financial support for Ukraine for the next year, and the Russian Federation must be held accountable for attacks on civilian and critical infrastructure. G7 will take measures to prevent the use of branches of Russian banks in such countries to circumvent sanctions. Countries will continue to reduce dependence on Russia in the field of nuclear energy. Zelenskyy appealed to the G7 with a proposal to provide Ukraine with security guarantees. The President of Ukraine suggested discussing steps to implement the Ukrainian peace formula and the details of organizing a peace summit.
Every decision to protect Ukraine and freedom guarantees the preservation of the international order based on rules. As a house grows from bricks, so freedom grows from our decisions. And our answer, in fact, is the basis for binding rules for the prevention of aggression. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, on G7 summit in Japan.
In July, Volodymyr Zelenskyy proposed to hold a peace summit where all the nuances for the implementation of peace could be discussed. In July will be 500 days that the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people heroically fight against a bigger but unequivocally weaker enemy of the United World. For almost the entire May, news about negotiations regarding the extension of the grain agreement between Ukraine, Turkey and the UN and Russia did not leave the columns of international media. A day before the end of the previous term of the agreement, the parties agreed to extend it for another 2 months, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said. At the same time, the Turkish president did not specify whether the continuation of the grain agreement includes changes that Russia had previously insisted on, in particular the unblocking of part of the sanctions. As Anadolu agency writes, Erdogan thanked the Russian side also for its readiness not to create obstacles for the exit of Turkish ships from the ports of Mykolaiv and Olvia. However, it became known later that Russia agreed to resume incoming inspections of ships bound for 2 of the 3 ports covered by the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Deputy Prime Minister of Community Development, Territories and Infrastructure Yuri Vaskov said in an interview with Interfax Ukraine. I would like to note that the last ship to enter the ports was inspected on May the 6th. Since May the 7th, the movement of new ships in the direction of the port has been stopped due to the position of the Russian delegation in the Joint Coordination Center.
Так як я почав з чого, що в самій угоді не
The agreement itself does not provide for the satisfaction of any needs of the Russian Federation. The agreement itself provides for the functioning mechanisms of the grain corridor from Ukrainian ports to international markets. What Russia is trying to instill in these issues are related to the ammonia pipeline, issues related to the lifting of sanctions from banks and organizations that are engaged in grain and fertilizer trading. This issue is still under discussion.
According to Bodnar, the UN signed an agreement with the Russian Federation and a corresponding memorandum on facilitating the resolution of these issues. However, Russia is still trying to put pressure on Ukraine and the world with the help of hunger and food shortages. After all, as of now, more than 30 million tons of agricultural products have been sent to meet the needs of the world. And only Russia's blackmail slows down the flow of Ukrainian grain to the countries of the world. As Alexei Kubrakov, the Deputy Prime Minister for the Reconstruction of Ukraine, wrote, from mid-April Russia began to limit the work of the initiative for no reason, and from May it actually blocked it, refusing to register a new fleet and carry out inspections of the fleet that goes to Ukrainian ports for loading.
We welcome the continuation of the initiative, but emphasize that it must work effectively. For this, it is necessary to eliminate the problems that Russia has been creating for several months in a row by sabotaging inspections and registering a new fleet. We hope that our partners will make every effort to ensure that the grain agreement begins to fully work for world food security and that Russia will eventually stop using food as a weapon and for blackmail. Alexander Kubrakov, Deputy Prime Minister for Restoration of Ukraine, on Facebook.
So, as we can see, Moscow's blackmail by disrupting the grain deal did not work. This is a victory for the world and another defeat for Russian diplomacy. The world will continue to receive Ukrainian products. Ukraine will make a significant contribution to food security. In addition to extending the grain initiative, it is also important to ensure its effectiveness, because at the moment Russia creates obstacles by sabotaging the inspections. The occupation of Ukrainian territories contributes to improving the conditions for the grain initiative. Together with partners, Ukraine will make every effort to ensure that the grain deal starts fully functioning for the sake of global food security and Russia finally stops using food as a weapon. 1 year ago, on May the 20th, 2022, the exit of Ukrainian troops from Azovstal ended. Our soldiers held the city of Mariupol for almost 3 months, surrounded without enough ammunition, food, water and medicine. The power of the shells fired in the city in TNT equivalent is greater than the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. This is how Mayor Vadim Boychenko assessed the active phase of the battle for Mariupol. As reported by the Russian mass media, 2,449 men and women left the Azovstal plant. No one knows the exact number, although the release was under the auspices of the Red Cross, and the international organization completed list of all the prisoners, but they were not published anywhere. About the decision to leave the Azovstal bunkers in order to save people's lives by order of the High Command, at around 20 p.m. on May 16, 2022, the commander of the Mariupol garrison, Denis Prokopenko, announced in a video message.
Головне усвідомити.
You always take risks. The main thing is to realize whether all the risks have been calculated, whether plan B has been worked out, whether you have fully committed yourself to this plan, which should combine the fulfillment of the tasks and the maximum preservation of the life and health of the personnel. Everything should be questioned. Every decision made, every plan, every operation. Perhaps that is why war is an art, not a science. When you have completed the task and kept the maximum number of personnel, this is the highest level of military management. Moreover, when your decision is approved by the highest military leadership.
All prisoners from Azovstal were sent to the occupied territories of Donetsk region. Most of them were placed on the territory of the former correctional colony near Olenivka, in the temporarily captured territory of Donetsk region. However, on the night of July 29th, a powerful explosion occurred in the building where Ukrainian prisoners of war were kept. As it turned out later, 54 people died and another 130 were injured in the explosion. I would like to note that representatives of the Red Cross were allowed to the scene of the tragedy only the next day. As noted in the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Russian invaders pursued at least two goals: to accuse Ukraine of committing war crimes, as well as to hide the torture of prisoners and executions, which were carried out there on the orders of the occupation administration and the command of the Russian armed forces. Almost all the prisoners who were able to return to Ukraine talk about the fact that the Russians used torture. Despite all efforts, only 20% of defenders were returned in 12 months. About 2,000 men and women are still in the hell of captivity, and together with them, their relatives and friends are only in the hell of uncertainty for the whole year. The coordinating headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war notes that it is extremely difficult to officially confirm the prisoners' whereabouts or state of health, as Russia does not provide any information about it. The mission of the International Committee of the Red Cross has the appropriate mandate to visit places of detention. However, representatives of the International Red Cross may visit places of detention of prisoners of war on the territory of the Russian Federation and temporarily occupied Ukrainian territories only with the permission of the aggressor country. Now our leadership is insisting on the implementation of all-for-all exchange. And according to the head of the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense, Kirill Budanov, this is real.
We are in principle approaching it. Let's look at the numbers again. As of now, more than 2,200 people have already been exchanged. This is an unprecedented case in world history. No one did that. All exchanges take place after the end of fighting and not during. Kirill Budanov, the chief of the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, in an interview with RBC Ukraine.
Among the exchanged defenders of Ukraine are many well-known media residents of Azov: photographer Dmytro Orest Kozatsky, paramedic Katerina Ptashka Polishchuk, senior sergeant of the 36th Brigade Mikhailo Dyanov, head of the Mariupol Patrol Police Mikhailo Vershinin. According to the agreements, the commander of the Mariupol garrison Denis Redis Prokopenko, the deputy commander of the Azov Svetoslav Kalina Polomar, the senior officer Oleg Homenko, the commander of the 36th Separate Marine Brigade Serhiy Volina Volinsky, and the commander of the 12th Brigade of the National Guard Denis Shelha are in Turkey after their release. They are their congeners or heroes of ours, and I hope for you, dear world, because these people defended their country despite everything. And now a minute of questions and answers. We ask you to subscribe, comment our videos, and ask your question. And today we will answer on the question of the user POKYII, who asked, after the war, does Ukraine have to worry about another attack on its territory? Does it have to worry about Russian-led revolts or violent movements or anything of the such? I will answer the second part of this question first. Does it have to worry about Russian-led revolts or violent movements or anything of the such? Of course, it is always worth worrying about. But you know, for this we have a security service, intelligence, counterintelligence, and considering how they have been working for the last time, I do not think that pro-Russian movements have any prospects in Ukraine. Will there be any violent movements? Of course they will, because no matter how the law enforcement agencies work, there will still be a lot of weapons in our land, and this issue will be resolved only with time. But I would like to dwell on another attack on our territory in more detail. You know, this is one of the biggest threats after the Ukrainian victory. After all, there is almost no doubt that we will win, but what the world will be like after our victory is an open question. We cannot forget the experience of politics in Europe between world wars. When Germany, which was defeated in the First World War, started a new, stronger and more terrible war in 20 years. It is very likely that the same revanchist sentiments may exist within Russia. Moreover, if we freeze the war now, I am sure that there will be another wave of escalation. After all, Russia has now lost most of its offensive potential, but over time, if everything is left as it will restore it. The Kremlin will find an opportunity to make money from the sale of energy resources, will find an opportunity to supply microchips for the production of missiles, airplanes and modern technology, as they are doing despite sanctions that are imposed on Russia now. And this is one of the main wishes of the Kremlin, to freeze the war, sign more modernized Minsk agreements, and then violate them. At the same time, the next attack may not be against Ukraine, because there are annexed territories in Georgia and Moldova, calls for the protection of Russian speakers in Kazakhstan and other Central Asian countries have been heard repeatedly. Therefore, if we do not build a new architecture of security in the world, which is written as one of the points in the peace formula of Ukraine, none of Russia's neighbors will be able to be calm. That's all for today and this week. Please subscribe, comment, and ask your questions. The hardest of them will be answered online by our team, and subscribe on our YouTube channel, where you can in particular watch an interview with Ukrainian Member of Parliament Oleg Dunda, who talks about how the regions of Russia already want independence. Stay safe and tuned for more.